Hi, good morning. Today is, sorry, I think, yes, today is September 29th, 2025, and it's 9:39 a.m. US Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. And it's part of the videos that I've been recording for the last few months of this series called Rapid Fire Tips for Law Enforcement. So this, I already made a quick session this morning about the full share, the incidents with the full share police department yesterday. The incidents that happened yesterday, 2 different incidents in the same day. And this is a second part of today's session, in which I'm going to talk exclusively about more technical details, okay? So this is going to be more of a technical demo. And it's, of course, designed towards technical audiences. That said, right, I'll try to express the ideas in a way or form that could be digestible by anybody. But if you have access to a technical person that can clarify things or help understanding the mechanics of some of the things that I'm going to say, I would recommend consulting with that person. Because of the time constraints, I can't go into very much detail on each item, right? I mean technical depth, right? So there might be some gaps maybe, but if you have access to a person that, for example, works at Google in QRewrite or in Moped, that will facilitate things. So I'm gonna I prepared a list of talking points, so I'm going to go through the different talking points for this session at the beginning to kind of give a structure to it. So I'm going to talk. This is my plan, right? My game plan is to talk about Lake Point Estates version 2.0, is this now, right? I'm going to talk about the indirection layer that I think it's happening here. I'm going to talk about something related to taxes and that indirection layer. I'm also going to talk about the infrared frequency of the cameras and the filters in the cameras, and a possible relation with control entities controlled by this network. I'm going to also talk about the high-performance Starlink antenna that I mounted on top of the KOL-Mobile yesterday, which I think is what triggered the second incident with the police in the evening. And I'm going to talk about something that I call the red-green lights. And at the end, I'm going to talk about some information that I received from the Venezuelan informant. I have no way to verify if that is true, but I'll just say it. And an observation, something I saw yesterday at Bookies, the gas station. That might be related to that. So that's the game plan. Okay, so about Lake Point Estates version 2.0, I'm not going to go into all the details because it would take 3-4 hours, right? But suffice to say that from my vantage point here, what I see is obvious to me at this point that they're doing here at Valleyside Drive, after I basically move my operation to this area back, right? Again, they are doing exactly the same things that they were doing at Lake Point Estates. It's like the resemblance of the techniques. It's uncanny. It's impressive. It's like you can see. I mean, and I'm grateful for the opportunity of being back here, because I mean I could have sold this house right a year ago, but I didn't. And because I didn't sell it and I'm able to come back, I'm able to now see the similarities, right? I can see that this is a playbook. Like all these tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, are repeatable procedures, right? That's what they are, that they can deploy anywhere. So the same thing that we're doing there, the same things, like all the actors, all the things, like the layout, like the relative location of the things to the target, like all the things are exactly the same here. Now, here is a bit different because the layout of the street that they can control is different. And they made the mistake of designing this area so to make it impossible for me to seek help. But that makes it so this area is very hard to surveil, even for them, right? So now they're having the problem that they have to fight with the same urban planning techniques that they put in place to protect themselves. Now they have to fight them, and they can't fight them, right? So it's super interesting. It's a super interesting situation, right? Because, I mean, and this is a bit more philosophical, right? But think about it for a second. Like, they created this design to prevent the FBI from figuring out what they're doing, right? And even them, being the creators of the setup, they can't defeat it. I can tell you they can't, because I have ways to know that they can't, right? And this is interesting to me for two reasons, right? Three reasons. One is, it's humbling to see, to witness, really, the power of the laws of nature, right? The laws of nature, at the end, is what governs every conflict, because you can't defeat physics. You can't defeat, doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter how many Chinese engineers you have, it doesn't matter how many Venezuelan 7 agents you have, you can't defeat physics and the laws of nature, right? So it's humbling to see that, right? And this is reflected. I mean, this is I don't know if this is too philosophical, right? But it amazes me to see. There is a quote, right? I'm gonna present my screen because I don't know the quote by heart, but you will see what I mean, right? I think it's this one. And I like that quote so much that I put it on the website maybe a year ago, because I realized this, right? Even back then. I want to read it to you. Yeah, so it says, so it's a quote from Thomas Henry Huxley, right? From 1868, imagine that. So this is almost 200 years ago, right? 160 years ago. And he said, the chessboard is the world. The pieces are the phenomena of the universe. The rules of the game are what we call the laws of nature. The player on the other side is hidden from us, exactly like Josaro Cabello. You would never guess it was him, right? We know to our cost that he never overlooks a mistake or makes the smallest allowance for ignorance. I mean, this is spot on, right? If I didn't know what they're trying to do, I wouldn't be here today, right? If I had a small ounce of ignorance about what they're willing to do to me or what they're trying to do to me, I wouldn't be here. And what governs all these are the laws of nature. Like, that's the one thing that they can't defeat, right? It doesn't matter how much money they have. It doesn't matter how many law enforcement agents. It doesn't matter, right? The laws of nature is what governs the conflict. And that's, because they use the laws of nature to protect all these agents and all this area against the FBI. Now, when they want to spy on my antenna, on my internet connection, now they have to fight with the same laws of nature, right? That they put in place, that they exploited to protect themselves. Now they have to fight the same laws of nature, and they can't defeat them, right? And the other reason why this is interesting to me is because if the designers of the protections can't defeat them, I mean, how can anybody expect the FBI to defeat them? It's impossible. Like, they will never. I mean, if the same organization that put all this in place cannot defeat the protections, the FBI stands no chance, right? Anyhow, I mean, in terms of defeating these geographical protections that they put in place, right? And I'm talking specifically about the immune geoentities pattern, how they design the urbanism in this area to basically shield this location, this street, from radio frequency eavesdropping in any possible direction, right? Well, almost any possible. There are some things that are vulnerable, but because I know how their eavesdropping technology works, I was able to plan for that and make it not possible. Let me tell you exactly what I mean, right? So I think the best way to show you this is by opening a map. 1 second. So if I go to 26714 Valley Side Drive, Katy, Texas, 774, which is this house, you will see what I mean, right? So first of all, this house is in a very short street. And remember, their eavesdropping technology works by traveling at a constant speed towards or away from the target, if possible, on a perpendicular path, right? That is the optimal way to do it, the way that you could capture the signature faster, right, and more reliably. Now, if you look at this layout, right, of this street, it's amazingly well designed. I'm going to tell you all the things that I see, right? First of all, if I'm the target, right, located here, the only way you could travel perpendicularly is through Valley Side Drive, which is a very short street, right? So you can't do it because there is a you know, like you have to reduce. You have to come on Lara Creek Drive, which is this street over here. Then you have to turn right, but at that point you have to slow down because there is a very strong curve, right? So you have to slow down almost all the way and then start accelerating. So that right there, your speed cannot be constant by definition, right? So that wouldn't work reliable. That's why they almost never do it through this street. They do it trying to go from here, from this point to this point, right? But it's still a very short distance. And as soon as my camera sees the car in the corner, it shuts down the network, triggering a renegotiation of the TLS, TSL, or TLS. So which defeats the purpose, right? Like if I trigger a renegotiation of the key, then even if they capture the key, it's lost because I made the system renegotiate a new key, right? Now, if they travel on Valley Side Drive, it's the same problem. They have to slow down in this sharp corner, and they have a very narrow distance, maybe 150 feet, right? And the speed will not be constant because they will be accelerating from almost a near stop, right? So they can do it that way. And if they travel on a Spring Ridge, you see the shape of this street. It's not really perpendicular to my house. It's, you know, it has an angle, like a 30-degree. So meaning as they travel on that street, they will be getting further away from me, from my house, in 2 separate dimensions at the same time. This makes the math problem related to this modeling more complex and more prone to error because they have to use approximations, right, to be able to do the math in a reasonable time. So it's very unreliable, right, to do it through a Spring Ridge. So the solution that what they're trying to do is to maximize the surface area, right? So what they're doing is that they're traveling on this street all day, back and forth, right? With very large vehicles. Very large because the larger the vehicle, the larger the surface area that is exposed to the signal from the satellite, right? And sometimes they do it. So it's basically it's a black SUV. I think it's an Escalade, or similar, like a Lincoln, like that, a Suburban, something like that. A black one, and they also have a white one, right? And they have these 2 SUVs back and forth on this street all day, hundreds of times per day, right? Trying to catch the signals. And they have to be large vehicles because that maximizes the surface area, right? It gives them more chances. But at the same time, it makes it more visible, right? To the cameras, to me, more obvious, to the people that might be watching from a satellite, right? The FBI, national security agencies. It's more visible to anybody, right? So that's one example of the laws of nature, right? They can't escape the laws of nature. So they have to use these supersized vehicles, right? Either the super large SUVs or the Gardner trucks that Diosdado Cabello likes to use that have this huge attachment on the back, which is full with antennas, right, and receptors. So that's, I don't know, it amazes me to think of that, right? But you see, so the setup of this street is such that it's designed to make this impossible, right? So now they have to fight with their own design, basically, which is, in a way, I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit satisfactory to see this, right? Like to see how they are struggling to fight with their own creation. Right? It's futile. It's pointless. Like they won't be able to defeat the laws of nature. Now, when I said what I said before, that it has a weakness, it does have a weakness, okay? And it all depends on how you point, like how you position your antenna, okay? And I'm planning to make a session only about this topic. It's a very interesting topic and it's very technical, so I think it better fits a single video. But for this one, I'm going to say that if I had positioned antenna in the other direction, they could do this easily, and I would have no recourse. Why? Well, because they have to intercept. So right now, right, the antenna, I'm going to give you an idea what it is, right? So the antenna right now is located more or less in this corner, right? Aligned with this fence. And I aligned it with this fence intentionally, right? That's not random. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I came to the conclusion that that was the best position, right? Why? Because, well, I realized that they're using the fences in Katy as a grid. Like all the fences are a grid, right? And what they have in that grid are antennas, right? Like sending things up, not catching things down. They catch things with the roof. The roof of their houses are modified to have sensors, right? And that's how they catch the signals coming down. So if I put my antenna in my roof, it would be vulnerable because they could catch it with any of the roofs of their houses, right? One second. Okay. Yeah, so this thing gives me a warning, and like if I don't click on it, it closes the session. Okay. So if I had put the antenna in my roof, it would be vulnerable, right? Because they could catch the signal, it would align with multiple of the roofs, and they could easily catch the downlink. But by aligning it with the fence that I know that is a grid that they have put there by design, it would align with their antennas that are sending the uplinks, right? So they don't really have a way to catch it, right? They don't have large surfaces, because the large surfaces are the roofs, and that's why the roofers are important in Katy, right? Because they are the ones that build the surfaces that are used to catch signals. I mean, for their downlinks, right? Not for interception necessarily, but for their downlinks. So the position of the antenna is important, right? You have to position it in a way that minimizes alignment or their chances of alignment. They would have to come and install tons of sensors with large surface areas aligned with their fences, and that would be visible, right? Everybody will see what they're doing. So they're not going to do that. And the other thing is the direction. Why? Well, because in this interception technique, they have to pass the vehicle in the path. So imagine that I'm the antenna, right? And I'm pointing in a direction. They have to pass the vehicle in front, right? So they can catch the signal coming in the same direction, right? Because the precision of that beam, the beam that comes down from the satellite, is very narrow. And if you think of me being the antenna, right? Imagine the beam coming down from a satellite to me. It's gonna land in the floor, right? Like if you remove the antenna, the signal is gonna land on the floor. So passing a vehicle 200 feet on the back of the antenna will not catch anything, right? They have to pass it in front, like in front in the path between the satellite and the antenna. So, of course, what I did is that my antenna, which is more or less located here, is pointing towards the south, right? So that forces them to pass the vehicle on Valley Side Drive if they want to catch the signal, right? Necessarily. Or on a Springfield Ridge, right? In which I will see them in this corner with the cameras, right? My cameras have view to that corner. And that's how my radio frequency eavesdropping system works. Like when the camera sees that a vehicle passes at a constant speed on that street, it forces the renegotiation of the key. So you see, they have no way really to doing this. But if I had positioned antenna, which I could have made that mistake, right? If I had positioned antenna facing the north, right? Then they would pass vehicles on Cedardale Pine Drives all day, right? At constant speed, and I would not be able to see them because this is on the back of my house. I don't have a line of sight to that street. I cannot possibly install any cameras that would allow me to see the vehicles coming back and forth on that street, and they would be intercepting the traffic all day, and I wouldn't even know it, right? So this is the weakness of this area. But the only way this weakness is actionable is if the target makes the mistake of pointing the antenna towards the north, right? So this is an example of, first of all, how the laws of nature is what governs this conflict and the outcome of this conflict, right? And secondly, it's a good example of how it is necessary to develop a deep understanding of the technique, because it's the only way that you can protect against what they're doing, right? So that's what I wanted to say about, how they're, doing the same thing that they were doing at Lake Point Estates with the cars, with the dog walkers, with the same actors they had at Lake Point Estates. They deployed them here, right? And they weren't here 2 months ago, because before I made all this visible to them, meaning before I installed the cameras outside, I had them inside, pointing outwards. And I measured the baseline. I measured how many cars came through a Springfield Ridge per day, per hour, at different times of the day, through Valley Side, how many dog walkers. I established the baseline. And I can tell you that all this is abnormal. But like what they've been doing for the last week or 10 days is abnormal. Like this is not how it was before I put the cameras outside. So I can say I can see that it's just a redeployment of what they had deployed at Lake Point Estates when I was there. Which I think it's important because it shows that it's not an isolated circumstance. This is a pattern, right? It's a repeatable pattern of racketeering. That's what it is. Digital racketeering is what it is. And it's all visible only because they are fighting with the laws of nature. Because they have to make this fight with the laws of nature, then they have to reveal their methods, right? By their actions, which are visible. So I think, for now, I'll give more details to authorities, but for the purpose of this demo, I think I'm going to move on to the next topic. So the next topic is about, I think, indirection, but let me check, okay? Yes, the indirection layer. So let me see how can I present this maybe. Okay, let me see if maybe I can do something like this. Okay, yeah, so what I'll do, I'll because I didn't prepare a script or anything, right? I'll just make some notes in this document. So it's because I need to illustrate something, right? So this is a principle that, this is a theory, I have to say, right? I haven't seen with my own eyes this system, inner workings, so I cannot be completely sure. But I believe this is what they're doing. And I'm going to describe how I think they're doing it and why, what problem this solves for them, okay? So imagine, this is a bit technical, okay? But imagine a database, like a spreadsheet, okay? And the spreadsheet has, actually, that's a better way to do it. I'm gonna do it in a spreadsheet. Yeah, because that way I have the columns already. Okay. So, okay, so I'm gonna make this spreadsheet. So I'm gonna say it has a column that is called employers. Okay, it has a column that is called girlfriends. It has a column that is called pets. It has a column that is called family. Okay, and employers, I'm gonna say show Yahoo, Google, Goldman Sachs, Twitter. Okay, girlfriends, I'm going to say Jillian, Gloria, pets, I'm going to say danger, Ariel, family, I'm going to say Edgar, Margarita, okay. So these are my columns, okay? Yeah, but please bear with me. I know this is taking too long, but it's an important technology, so I think. And I'm going to say that all these things are related to me. Okay. Okay. So the technique, right? The indirection layer that they have implemented is the following, right? Oh, this is a good example. Okay. So what? Okay. So let me get back to the. Sorry. Sorry. 1 second. I have to connect something here. Let me get back to the problem that they're solving with this. Okay. So in the last session, I mentioned that they use the registrations of the properties and other public data sets as a way to they use them as databases. Okay, that's what I said, to mark their own agents and to track them. And I hypothesize that they probably do it using something very similar to the QRewrite technology. The QRewrite is a technology from Google that basically finds synonyms or similar cluster terms on a phrase. So for example, if you type pizza NY in Google, right? You're looking for a pizza in New York, you type pizza NY. QRewrite will synonymize NY to a multiple set of terms. It will synonymize it to New York, which is a bigram, to Manhattan, to New York State, to the Empire State, to a series of things, right? And each synonym will have a confidence score between 0 and 1. And this is a crucial piece of technology for Google to be able to find information relevant to your query, right? The reason is, well, maybe you're referring to a term or to a concept in a certain way, but not everybody refers to that in the same way. And it's possible some website authors have an interesting content, but it's just referred in a slightly different form, right? So if you just look for exact match of the word, you wouldn't find that piece of content. So to find every possible piece of content that is relevant, you need to synonymize or expand the query. But when I realized that, right, it got me thinking, well, why? Because I use a similar technology to score their agents, and it works like a charm. So I know this is what they're doing, right? Because I reverse engineered it. But it made me think, right? So you have to think of the motivation. So the question is, why do they have to do this, right? Why do they have to use a QRewrite equivalent to score their own agents, right? So that's when the hypothesis came to my mind that it might be an indirection layer. An indirection layer is basically something that sits in the middle of two systems that kind of provides a separation, right? And I think this is for legal reasons. So all this cannot be easily traced back to them. But let me tell you how this hypothesis that I have would play out, okay? So the problem they're trying to solve is to inform their system that Daniel Molero is the cat assigned to Reynaldo Aguiar, right? That's the problem. The system programmatically needs to know that one of my cats is Daniel Molero. They can't record this in a database because it would be like signing a confession, right? It would be like saying, yes, we are harassing Reynaldo with Daniel Molero, right? So they can't put this in writing. So what they do, they create an indirection layer. They have a database of targets and a database of agents on their side, but they're not connected to each other, right? So they have a database of people like Reynaldo Aguiar, and it has information about Reynaldo Aguiar, but that on itself is not a crime, right? Having information about Reynaldo Aguiar is per se not a crime, right? It's not something that the FBI could pursue. Having information about their own agent is also not a crime. The crime is targeting Reynaldo with Daniel Molero. That is the crime, right? But these two people are not present in the same database. They have two databases. One database where Daniel Molero is, which is the database of saving agents. And they have a separate database, which is a database of people, possibly targets, right? In which there are only targets. There's no saving agents in that database, right? So if any of the two databases get captured, that's per se is not a crime. Could be a privacy violation, but it would be a minor offense, right? So the problem they're trying to solve is how to inform their system that my cat is Daniel Molero. Why? Well, because this is important. Imagine that I'm at a grocery store and I find Daniel Molero in front of me with, Gloria, for example, right? This would be a catastrophe. So they have to programmatically, they can't be making sure this doesn't happen for everybody in the world because I'm not the only target, right? They have to do this in a way that scales. And they do it with a logistical app like Uber, right? So if this system sees that I'm in the proximity of Daniel Molero, the secret app that he has on his phone, at some point it was the Second Fire app, right? Would give him an alert and give him instructions to leave the place using a path that I'm not going to cross, right? Programmatically, all this happens automatically. So the system needs to be aware of the relationship of him being my cat, right? But this cannot be recorded in a single database that says, Daniel Molero is the cat of Reynaldo, because this would be the confession of the crime, right? And this is where the indirection layer comes into play, the QRewrite. So what is that they do? They register the property of the agent, right, with names that would cause matches in the QRewrite synonymization logic with the metadata that they have about the target, right? So in this example, right, this house that was at Lake Point State in front of Robert Mueller, right? the house is registered to King, Daniel, Everett, Christina S, right? Christina was also a girlfriend that I had in the university, right, in Caracas. So if you look at that registration, it will cause the following matches. King is a synonym for Ray, which is my nickname. My name is Reynaldo. The abbreviation of that in Spanish is Ray, right? So this would be one match. Everett would be another match because of Yvette, whose second name is Everett, right? And then there's another match here, which is Christine, right? So you see, in this registration, there's 1, 2, 3 matches out of 4 words. And the other word is his real name, right? So if you count the matches, right, this would give you 3 strong matches on the girlfriend column specifically, right? Christina, Everett, and King, no, the first name, right? Right, so in names, so there's another column here, right? That would be names. And then it would contain things like Rinaldo, Javier, Aguiar, Marcano, Ray, right? And Javi, another nickname that my family used for me, my mom, and etc. Right? So right now, so that registration causes a match on my name because of Ray, and on 3 girlfriends, right? So the system knows this. I mean, if you do this across all the targets in that database, I will have the highest score. Because it's impossible that somebody has more than this number of matches, because I have all the matches except for his first name, right? So this immediately tells the system that this is a cat that is targeting Rinaldo, and is something about girlfriends, right? Because there's 3 girlfriend matches. They didn't make the match on the employer. They made the match, the 3 of matches, on the girlfriend column, right? So this gives context to the app immediately that he has a connection to me because he's the cat, and it's something related to a romantic, let's call it vertical, right? So that's how they create the link, right? It's an indirect link between him and me that is not written anywhere, but in the matches that would be inferred by QRewrite. So that's why that indirection layer is there. Another example, which is also him, right, is this other this other one, 24, 11, golden fork drag, right? Oh, they removed it. No, it's here. Okay, so if you see this one, right? So it has show, which is a match on employers, right? It has James, which is a match on family. And it has Gloria A, which would be a match on Gloria Andrea, my former partner, right? So this house, right, is related to an agent that has something to do with family and employment. But the important point is that the indirection layer is what provides all that context without having to write it anywhere, right? It's a form to commit crimes without and having them recorded in the database, but in a way that it's so obscure that it would take a Google engineer to see it, right? It's the only way that this could be uncovered. And that's unfortunately what happened, right? So that's the indirection layer. And now I'm going to go to another topic, which is taxes, right? I was thinking about this last night, and I don't know how to articulate this, but the thought is that imagine the case of Daniel Molero, right? So he has all these different identities. At this point, I count probably 3 or 4, right? Daniel Molero, Daniel King Everett, this James Shaw, the Lawrence Terrace on the Lara Creek, house. And the question that came to my mind is, well, are all these aliases paying taxes? Because, like to buy, I mean, that house in Lara Creek is on the mid-range, and it's probably $600,000. The house on Lake Point State is over $1 million, right? It's a luxury home. The other house on the Harmony Drive, where the SUV was parked, was $600,000. So just in houses, right? These aliases that he maintains have control of over $3 million in property, on real estate property in the US. And these properties have to pay property taxes. And more importantly, to be acquired, they require for large sums of money to be paid to the sellers of those houses. And that money had to pay taxes, right? So I guess the question that came to my mind last night is if all these aliases are paying taxes, if all those, say, $3-4 million are accounted for by the IRS, right? And this is an interesting question because think about it for a second, right? If you're running a criminal enterprise of this scale, you can't have these aliases going to do the taxes at an accountant that you don't control. It's obvious, right? Because the accountant is not stupid. He might start asking questions and he might figure out that there's fraud involved here somewhere, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that necessarily, so there's two options, right? Either these aliases are not paying taxes, which I don't think would be the case because that would be a red flag. I mean, some automated system of the IRS, of the FBI could flag this, right? At a massive scale, and then everything would unravel. So I think they're paying taxes. But I think this creates a weakness, is that the accountants that are doing all these taxes have to have two properties. One, a single accountant must be doing the taxes for multiple aliases, because there have to be more aliases than accountants, logically, right? So if you see an accountant that is doing the taxes for multiple aliases that are marked in the GeoIndex, the accountant has to be in it, right? And that's could be a gold mine, because the accountant should be held to a higher standard in regards of tax fraud, right? A higher standard than the rest of the population, right? It's like a doctor, right? I mean, if you're a citizen and you give somebody an Advil or a Tylenol and it makes them sick, you could be civilly liable, maybe, right? I don't know, maybe it could be a crime, or it could be manslaughter, like, I don't know, right? What would be the legal denomination of that action if you harm the person with a Tylenol, right? But if you're Marjorie Broussard and you know the person is dehydrated, and you increase the dosage of a medication that you know will suppress thirst by 400% after you saw that the person is dehydrated, and you told him that he's dehydrated, you put it in the report. I mean, the liability, you have to be held to a higher standard, because you're a doctor, for God's sake, right? You are not a common citizen in this situation. You have a duty to protect the patient, and you took an oath to do so. The same applies to the accountant. The accountant, knowing how the financial crimes and fraud are typified in the IRS and tax codes, if the accountant is helping the aliases evade taxes or create these fake statements, right, to legitimize capitals, to buy houses and receive payments that are not properly taxed or attributed to the real person, that accountant has to be held to a higher standard than a regular person committing tax fraud, right? And I think this could create an immense amount of legal leverage towards, for the FBI, towards that compromised accountant, and maybe they will talk, right? So it could be a way, if the accountant knows that this house really belongs to Daniel Molero, right? Or to another agent in the case of the other house, right? The accountant might talk, right? And if the accountant is talking, then, there is no need to even find the mayor's certificate in Venezuela, right? So that's taxes. So now I'm going to talk about infrared frequencies. This is what happened in two demos ago. It's funny how I'm starting to measure time in demos. Right? 2 demos ago, I mentioned the observation that the black Tesla was emitting the infrared lights. Like it has the bizarro flashing lights that the most prominent 7 cars have in K, right? And I was able to see it through the Tesla camera because they got the reflection of the flashing lights got reflected by a chrome bumper of a truck that was parked behind. So after that, that was what made me go buy the other cameras, right? That I'm upgrading in the KOL-Mobile. Because I know the GoPro, they can see some infrared, but not all, right? And this is the interesting part. It can see some. I know that the GoPro cameras can see some infrared because I have seen, and in fact, I use these as a detection signal in the pipeline. And I've been using the GoPro cameras as input for a year, more than a year. So I know they're not completely blind to infrared, but they don't see the same number of cars as the Tesla cameras. When I'm in the black Tesla with my former partner, the frequency of occurrence is higher. So this got me thinking, right? So I went and bought the other cameras, and I checked the specs, and I know that they can see infrared. In fact, they have infrared LEDs to see with night vision, right? So they're not blind to infrared. Now, I installed the cameras, and again, I saw something weird. The response is different. I see way less cars with the bizarro flashing lights than when I am in the black Tesla. It's interesting, right? I see some cars with the new cameras, but not the same frequency, and the intensity of the lights is not the same. They look much, I have to really make an effort to see the flashing light. So it's obvious to me at this point, oh, another data point, the digital watchdog cameras that I have do see the frequencies, do see more occurrences than the GoPros and the Armcrest cameras that I bought recently. So obviously, there is a difference in the visual response of the cameras to these infrared lights. It's obvious, right? So that tells me that these are not just any infrared lights. These are infrared lights of specific frequencies that they design and pick, right? And the Tesla cameras happen to be very sensitive to this very frequency of infrared light that the 7 uses in their cars. Right? You know, it's 2 and 2 together, right? It's the same form of collaboration that I hypothesized when I've noticed that they were bouncing signals of the Starlink satellites. I said, you know, to make this possible, if I was Xi Jinping, I would make sure that all those Starlink satellites, the surface of the enclosure is designed with a material that is highly reflective to the frequencies that I'm going to use to bounce the signals of the satellites, obviously, right? So controlling the logistics chain of the manufacturers of those materials is important. It's the same here, right? What a coincidence it is that the Tesla cameras seem to be super sensitive to this very specific frequency of infrared light that all the other cameras that I've tried, and I mentioned already 3 different brands, have different degrees of sensitivity, but nothing close to what the Tesla has, right? I mean, this shows design, right? This shows collaboration, at the very least. Now, related to that, I have to say, right? I mean, and this is not my area of expertise. Like, I'll have to check with an expert on this, right? I do follow this topic. I mean, I've read about this. It's not a smoking gun or anything, but it's, you know, it's one more data point, right? So in this area of self-driving technologies, right? From what I understand. And here, please, I might be wrong, I might be misinformed, or my information might be outdated, right? I'm not an expert on this, and I don't claim to be. But this is what I read 3 years ago. Is that in this field of self-driving technologies, there were basically two schools of thought 3 years ago. One school of thought was that you could do this with LiDARs, with laser, right? And there's a company, I think it's in Texas, that has it's a young guy that created some LiDAR technology and patented it, right? And there's a group of people in this industry and followers of this industry that believe that LiDAR is the future of self-driving because it allows you to map 3D, right? And it's better that's what they think. I'm just repeating what I've read, right? I'm not agreeing with either side, but there's two sides on this argument. One side is the side pro-LiDAR, and I might be pronouncing it wrong. Sorry, my English pronunciation is not perfect. The second school of thought is Elon Musk's, in which he says that all these problems can be solved with regular cameras with computer vision, right? And this is the thought that I want to share. If you think about it, right, of that phrase, solving the automation problem with computer vision with regular cameras. It is exactly what this criminal enterprise is doing with the spy vehicles. Like, the reason why they come rushing to come close to my car in an intersection is just to give the opportunity to the cameras to capture my car, and they have a computer vision system that recognizes that car is the target, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is that the design principles behind the physical surveillance network implemented with the cars and the iPhones of the agents, right? I don't know if authorities ever follow me, right? When I'm outside, you will see that every time I'm outside, always there is a person that comes close to me holding a phone, and they're doing something in the phone, right? Like, they could be like talking on the phone like this, or they could be like sending a message. But the common thing that you will notice is that the camera lens of the phone is always pointing to my face. Always. Like, there's no exception to this. Wherever I go, I always have a phone pointed to my face, right? It could be a harassment technique, right? Like, to kind of put me under stress. I don't know. But I think it's just a computer vision system. They have a way to enable the camera temporarily of all these phones based on location when they know the phone is close to me. And the agent's job is to just do something that justifies the camera pointing to my face. Like, on Saturday, right, when I went to the Bluey's house in Gallerias, there was a woman in the group, right? We entered by groups with the kids. There was a woman in the group, she was maybe 6'8", early 50s, I would say. She was white. Her hair was like to the shoulders, tainted. During the entire session, like in multiple occasions, she was doing things with the phone and she was pointing the camera at me, right? If I moved to a different room inside Bluey's house, she would go there and then she would start doing something with the phone, but pointing the camera at me, right? Could be a coincidence, right? Like, I mean, but knowing how this thing works, I imagine it's a system that enables the camera for a few seconds when the phone is detected to be in my proximity. And that allows visual tracking of the target 24/7, right? And they do the same with the cameras that they have in the cars. So you see this, but the point I was trying to convey is that I feel like the design principle behind these methods of physical tracking and surveillance are compatible, to say the least, with Elon's vision of how self-driving should work, right? Which is interesting on itself. But the other thing that is interesting, talking about the infrared frequencies, is that of all the camera systems that I have, the two that are more responsive to these specific frequencies are the Tesla cameras, the iPhone cameras, and the digital watchdog cameras. And these three companies are heavily under the control of the network, right? So it is possible, I mean, I'm mentioning this because it could be a footprint, right? I mean, identifying which consumer products have cameras that are responsive to these specific frequencies could be a tell, could allow authorities to, it's another data point that, yes, this company is probably controlled by this network, right? And the reason behind that is because, well, they need to create these manufacturers to manufacture these cameras so they can, implement their own systems in other companies that respond to these signals, right? Obviously. So that's why the control companies that manufacture cameras or that use cameras have to respond to these frequencies. So the systems can adapt to do what the network needs to do, right? When they see the signals with these frequencies. So it could be a tell. It could be a tell for authorities to identify, or another data point to identify that, yes, this company is probably in it, right? Like digital watchdog, for example, right? Digital watchdog is so much under the control of this network that they were giving information. And I have this on email because they made a mistake and they emailed me a support person from Digital Watchdog sent me an email asking me information about my cameras, right? And he made a mistake, and by mistake, he included a previous email that somebody else from an external company that has nothing to do with Digital Watchdog sent that person instructing him to extract information from me about the cameras. Right? Imagine that. And I have this email, and I submitted it to I think it was to, I believe I submitted to Ken Paxton's office when I made a complaint to the AG, to the Texas Attorney General office. It's crazy. Anyhow, so that's what I wanted to mention about infrared frequencies. So now I'm going to move to another topic, okay? The Starlink antenna that I mounted on top of the KOL-Mobile. So in the last demo this morning, the previous part, I mentioned that the second harassment incident in the evening with the full share police came after I installed that antenna. And I think it has something to do with antenna, okay? And this is a hypothesis. I don't know if this is the case, but I imagine, right? So, and I mentioned in that video that this is a very high-end antenna. This is a $3,000 antenna, right? Just antenna costs $3,000. And this is important, right? Because this antenna is engineered, right? It's an equipment that has been engineered to respond with high performance characteristics to the specific frequencies that the Starlink satellites use, right? Because it's a Starlink high performance antenna, right? That costs $3,000. And I know that this network is bouncing off signals of those same satellites in an illegal manner to send messages around the world, right? That are not under supervision or oversight of any agency, right? So logic tells me, and the reason I'm saying this is because I think one of the reasons they sent that police officer in the evening was to see if the antenna was connected to something, what I was doing exactly with the antenna. Because their biggest fear is that I'm using that antenna to listen as a passive listening device, right? That is their biggest fear. Why? Well, because this antenna was engineered to respond with high performance characteristics or response to those specific frequencies that, as I mentioned before, they engineered all the materials in the satellite to reflect, right? So this would be the perfect ear to catch those signals in a passive way, right? And their fear is that I'm going to go around, Katie, listening to everything I can, right? And I want to confirm here that, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to use this super high-end antenna to listen to everything I can catch. So that's one of the things that I'm going to do with that antenna, right? The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to also enable it as an active transmitter. Why? Well, because at this point I know, very well how the eavesdropping technique works. And I want to learn more about how it works on a moving target. Because it's one thing to intercept an antenna that is fixed on that patio, right? That's like, shooting a sitting duck. But I want to see how they do it with a moving duck, right? So I'm going to enable the antenna, and I'm going to transmit sensitive information them into them using the antenna as I'm driving, right? To see what they do, right? Of course, I know they're going to, pass the planes on top of the vehicle. I've seen that, right? But I have already a technology to defeat that. So it's going to be an interesting, skirmish, to put it in a way. And that is going to allow me to learn, right? A new technique. So that's the second objective. And the third objective is that I'm going to transmit sensitive information that is damning to them as I'm driving, but is information that is traceable, right? What I want to know is if that they make the mistake of intercepting the communications using Starlink's internal network, right? Which would be traceable and would be, would make Starlink liable as a company, and Elon Musk, right? So it's a three in one that I'm doing here. Okay, but yes, I want to confirm. So no need to send the police officer. I'll tell you. Yes, I'm going to listen with this antenna in the most sensitive places in Katy and the extended area. And then now I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is the green light and red light observation. So remember when I mentioned that I was approaching a stoplight, a red light, and I stopped the vehicle like 200 feet behind. There was no traffic, right? There was a buffer zone of 200 feet. I wasn't stopping any traffic. I just want to make that clear. And I stopped the vehicle there for like 20 seconds, right, to avoid the agents intercepting me because they were already waiting for me in the red light. Now, then this is crucial, right? If I think of every time I go outside, I can tell you, and I've measured this, I always hit the red light. It's impressive. Like, it's like I have such a bad luck, Like, when I go out, I always get on every single traffic light, I get the red light. Always. It's, well, not always. I would say 97. I measured this, right? Like, this is measured because I have the footage from the KOL-Mobile. It's something like 97%, right? 97% of the times when I get to a traffic light, it's red or turns red as I'm getting there, right? So to maximize the time that I have to be sitting there as a sitting duck. And it makes sense. Like, if you think about it, right? If their goal is to intercept the target in a corner, if they do it organically with no intervention, they would get random probability of getting the target stopped at a traffic light. But because they have such systemic control of everything in this area, they can control the traffic lights. So the logical step to take is to always make sure that the target gets the red light, right? That maximizes the chances for the 7 agents to intercept the target using less vehicles, right? Because the target is stopped, he can move, right? Has to wait for the green light. And I think that's the reason why they started installing cameras in the traffic intersections, in the traffic lights, around 2 years ago, right? When things escalated. To be able to automate this, right? Now, something interesting happened yesterday. I had made plans with my former partners to, pick up Sebas and drop off some things at their apartment. So we ended up, both of us, at Main Event, which is a network hub of this network here in Katy. Many prominent agents, their kids, when they're teenagers, they work at Main Event. This is a pattern. Like, if one way to identify the agents is to look at the kids that work at Main Event, look at the parents, and see which one of them are marked in the geo index, which high paramilitary score or with crypto payments. All of this is available on spyhell.org. For example, Daniel Parras would fall into this category, right? So anyhow, we went there, right? And as we're going back to her apartment, the setup was that she was driving in front, right, in the black Tesla, and I'm driving behind her. And I have to tell you, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. It was the first time in the last, I would say, 10 years that I could travel that distance, right? It's a distance, I mean, if it was me alone in my car, it would be like half an hour driving. But it took us maybe 12 minutes because we didn't hit one single red light. And this is amazing to me. The only difference was that I was driving behind her, right? So it seems like if I'm driving alone, I mean, this is my conclusion from 10 years of observation driving alone and one observation driving behind her. But it seems from this empirical observation that if I'm driving alone, I get all the red lights. But if I'm driving behind her, she gets all the green lights, and therefore I get the green lights as well. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. Let me silence them. Okay. Yes. So it seems like she gets all the green lights and I get all the red lights. And if you think about it, right, this could be an implementation of the immune entities pattern, not geo entities, but remember, like when I say immune entities pattern, it means when they are protecting their agents against the same things that they do to the rest of us, right? And immune geo entities is a specific type of protection related to buffer zones, okay? But this could be an implementation of an immune entities pattern. Why? Well, because they know that stopping a target at a traffic light makes the target vulnerable. And if they're concerned of the FBI potentially following the black Tesla, they have to minimize the probability of the FBI getting close to the black Tesla for a period of time of 3 seconds, which would allow them to capture the cookies, the traffic, everything, right? The same thing that they're doing to everybody, right? So what's the solution? Make sure that black Tesla always get the green light, unless Reynaldo is in the car. That's why those flashing lights were caught the other day, because I was in the car and the car was transmitting the infrared frequency to signal that the car should be stopped in the red light as it was. And the fact that there was a truck parked behind was because we were all stopped in the truck in the red light, right? So this is consistent with what I'm saying. The reason why I could see the flashing light is because we were stopped at a red light and I was in the car. But yesterday I wasn't in the car, and then the car gets all the green lights, right? So it's amazing because, I mean, the on-site implication, right, is that they have a way from the traffic camera. Sorry, my dogs. I'm sorry, this is sound professional. I'm really sorry. Give me just a second, please. Yeah, so sorry about that. Okay. Yes, so as I was saying, yes, the on-site implication is that one of the purposes of those infrared flashing lights could be to alert the camera system that they started installing 2 years ago when I tried to talk to the FBI that, the car should be stopped or should be let pass, right? Like, it's a way to cause a reaction on the traffic lights. Now, what I don't know, if this is automated, right? If this is embedded, I mean, and to go into the details, right? Like, how would I implement this? Well, I would make sure, because I don't think they're going to do this in the city, right? Because it would be too visible. It would be too risky. The way to do this is to make sure that the city buys these cameras from a specific vendor that they control, the vendor of the automation, right, for the traffic lights. And the vendor makes sure first that the cameras can see this specific frequency of infrared. And secondly, that in the logic, in the software that controls the timing of the traffic lights, they put logic, I mean the vendor, this wouldn't be visible to the city, right? The vendor has put logic inside of that control system that basically when it sees a pattern or a specific frequency of infrared, it turns the traffic light red. Or if it sees a different specific pattern or flash or frequency of infrared, it turns it green, right? And then the health app coordinates and makes the decision whether to flash the infrared lights with frequency A or frequency B, depending whether they want to let the car go or stop, right? And if it's a target, it's a stop, and if it's an agent, it's a go, right? So to protect the agent from the FBI. So, I mean, and these, again, when I'm saying these things, I'm just picking the things that I think could be high liability and easy to find, right? Like easy to demonstrate, because it would make these people talk, right? So, for example, if this is correct, what this would mean is that the company that is the vendor providing these cameras and control system is participating in counterintelligence against the FBI. That's what it means, right? Super high liability, they will talk. But it was amazing to me to see yesterday that I was able, for the first time in 10 years, to travel this distance in 12 minutes. It usually takes me more than double, right? Almost 30 minutes. Because I have to stop on every single traffic light at red. So that's the red and green traffic lights. And I have one more item, which is a strange observation at the Bookies gas station yesterday. So I went yesterday to the Bookies, right? And I saw something strange, but I have to confess that I wasn't looking for this. I mean, I was looking for this specifically because I'm saying this because I might be biased, right? Like maybe I was biased, right? Because it was a manual observation. I have to codify this into the system to be able to do it statistically in a statistically correct manner at a scale. But the reason why I was looking for this yesterday, manually, visually, was because the Venezuelan informant told me something. And this is something I'm going to say because it's information I received, but I want to make the disclaimer that I don't know if this is true. I have no way to verify this, right? And because I don't have a way to verify this, I'm going to isolate the comment, and I'm going to say a specific gas station is doing this, but I'm going to talk in general what he told me, okay? What he told me was that, yes, this comes from a previous conversation. The gas stations, some gas stations are participating in a mechanism to help Diosdado Cabello launder large amounts of money from the drug trade, okay? But the comment he made was that, and this was recent, he said, one of the problems that they had was that the Venezuelan production dropped to the floor over the last decade, right? So the laundry machine wasn't being very efficient. And what he said is that some gas stations have implemented, with the vendors of the technology that measures the flow of the pump, a mechanism to misreport the amount of gas being sold, right? Think about it for a second. The implication is, well, I mean, if you're already doing this, right, to launder money, the next logical step is, well, why sell the gas at all, right? I mean, if you could have a way that you could say that, say, 40 gallons of gas were sold, but you really dispensed 10, right? You effectively increase the efficiency of the machine, the laundry machine. So what the informant told me is that some gas stations are participating in this scheme. I don't have a way to know which ones, but it's just a tip, right? It's just a tip for the authorities when they eventually investigate this. Now, I have to say something. I went yesterday to the Bookies gas station, and I don't know. It could have been a coincidence. But I'm just going to say what I observed, right? My observation. I'm not implying that Bookie is doing this or that. I'm not saying that. I'm going to say what I observed. The Bookie in Katy, in I-10, it's a very large, it's immense, right? It has capacity for maybe 100 cars at a single time, right? And I have the number, like my system counts the vehicles in the pump. So I have to check what is the highest number that I've seen. And I haven't checked this number, but I imagine it's around 100 cars, maybe more, right? I don't know. So the observation, because the informant told me this, I drove around, and the authorities can check this on the security videos of September 28. You will see that I did this, right? I drove around all the pumps very slowly, and I counted how many cars had the nozzle in versus how many cars had the nozzle out. And the result doesn't make much sense to me. 92% of the cars had the nozzle out, meaning they were not really filling gas at that very moment. And this doesn't make sense, because if you think of the process of filling gas, putting gas in your tank, the thing that takes the larger amount of time is the actual filling the tank, right? Not putting the nozzle in or out or paying. Like, those things take seconds. But the chunk of the time should be spent actually filling the gas. And this makes sense because this is a high rotation business. The gas station only makes money if the cars are moving fast, right? So they have to optimize this process. So you spend little time at the pump not filling gas, because that's what they're selling, right? Time at the pump. So how is it possible that 92% of the vehicles were not filling gas at the same time, right? It's odd. It's very strange. Now, that there's many possibilities, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing what the informant told me that some gas stations do. It could be, for example, that the cars are surveillance cars and they're just parked there, right? They're using it as a parking dispatching center. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're faking the sale of gas, right? But I don't know. It was just a super strange observation. I mean, it shouldn't be the case that if you have 100 vehicles filling gas, 92 of them do not have the nozzle in. It's crazy, right? So I think this is a good place to stop the demo. And I'll keep working on a few things, and I'll see you on the next one.